My name is David Godfrey with the ABA Commission on Law and Aging. Joining me today is Dr. Jason Karlawish to talk about his new book, The Problem of Alzheimer's: How Science, Culture, Politics Turned a Rare Disease into a Crisis and What We Can Do About It. Jason is a professor of medicine and medical ethics and health policy and neurology at the University of Pennsylvania and is co-director of the Penn Memory Center, where he cares for patients and their families. We're honored to have him in his second term as a commissioner on the ABA Commission on Law and Aging. Dr. Karlawish, thank you for joining us today. Why a book
Welcome.
on Alzheimer's and why now?
Um, it's a big problem. It's only getting bigger, and I felt it was time to speak two big, broad truths out and out loud. Number one, it's a problem not simply because there are more old people and not enough younger people to take care of them, but from other causes, which I explain. And number two, there are things we can do right now, to take care of the crisis. One of them is to develop better therapeutics, but it's not just about drugs. In fact, I think one of the key points I make in the book is we're not going to drug our way out of this complicated problem, and we need to see it as a humanitarian problem, and we need to address it the way we address humanitarian problems.
Hmm. How big is the problem of Alzheimer's, and how concerned should families, lawmakers, and policymakers be?
Yeah, well, it depends on how you want to describe it. And in the book, I describe some of the controversies and frustrations over just that. How do you describe the size of this problem? I'll detail two briefly. One is just how many people have the disease. And I detail in the book how frustrating it's been to come up with a common understanding of how many people have Alzheimer's. Having said that, I think we have arrived at the sense that we're talking of millions of people who have disabling cognitive impairments, whether they're caused by plaque and tangle pathology or something else, we can debate. That number probably is upwards to 5 million people, probably. That's a lot of people. The second way we can describe the problem, which also has been a source of a lot of controversy, and again, in the book, The Problem of Alzheimer's, I detail why it became a source of controversy, is the fact that the disease, though it's not infectious, sort of acts like an infectious disease insofar as it inherently engenders other people into it, namely this idea of the caregiver. And I talk about in the book the rise of the recognition of the caregiving role. And the challenges there is really two. Number one, it was so wrapped up into cultural values about the family and the role of women that it was wrapped up in women's struggle to obtain their own sense of identity and autonomy. And number two, for reasons that I think almost warrant another book, caregiving has been frankly undervalued in our country. And so arriving at how you care about caregivers still remains a controversy. I'll leave it with this simple point. When we talk about the $1 billion cost of Alzheimer's disease and we all get all scared, the truth is most of that number is if we monetize the work of caregivers. If we say that the time a daughter spends supervising, overseeing, et cetera, the care of her father or father-in-law, et cetera, is a wage to be paid, that gets us up to the $1 billion figures, you know. But
Yeah.
the problem, of course, is as a society, we haven't been willing to properly pay her for the work that she and millions of others, we think there are probably about 12, 16 million caregivers out there. So those are just two ways of looking at the size and the scope of this vast problem. Very different than the other diseases of aging.
Mm. What's been the greatest advance in understanding Alzheimer's in the last 20 years?
The greatest advance has been scientific. I think that the ability to begin to see into the brain of a living human the presence of the pathology and pathophysiology transformed a disease which up until 2000, the turn of the century, could only really be fully seen when you died and had a brain autopsy. There are no other diseases of the body, at least common diseases, that up until that late in the course of human history enjoyed such being hidden. I will say I think the other great advances in social and economic policy that began to recognize caregiving as a job, as I pointed out in my other answer.
Mhm.
But I think the big advance was the biology that allowed, through a discovery called Pittsburgh Compound B, the ability to visualize amyloid, one of the pathologies of the disease, in a living human being.
Yeah. The book talks about the non medical care of families with Alzheimer's and briefly describes the kinds of things that you prescribe or recommend to your patients. What are they and why are they important?
Um, it's so basic, and yet it's so hard for patients and families to get what I prescribe because it's not a pill, and that is education and training. Education about what is wrong, what is the diagnosis, where are we at now, what to expect in the future, and how can I manage these disabilities. Um, at our memory center, I begin that process in conjunction then with a team of social workers. Uh, those social workers, unfortunately, are only made possible because of of a generous donation from a donor. Otherwise, if we relied on the typical billing mechanisms, I don't think we could sustain that program, and that's the story for most memory centers. But the point is education for the patient and the family, and then skill building, how to solve those functional problems, how to address them. And then finally, access to the probably poorly named long-term care services and supports in the community. And one that I highlight a lot in the book, and I went to one and interviewed the director of it, is an adult day activity program. I went to Mainline Adult Day Activity Program, interviewed Pam, spent some time there, really got to know what goes on in these programs. They're underfunded, they're underavailable, and they're absolutely necessary. And they should simply be part of our nation's infrastructure for caring for older adults with disabling cognitive impairments.
Mhm. What are the two most important things readers should take away from reading the book?
It didn't have to be the crisis that we're living in. It's not just that there's many more old people than there used to be. There are fewer people to take care of them, and we did not, as a society, we have not, as a society, taken the things that we can do to reorganize the way we deliver care, think about this disease. And I think the second one is we will make progress in developing therapeutics, pills, infusions, et cetera, that go after some of these pathologies. But the notion that we can drug our way out of this complicated problem is, I think, akin to buying lottery tickets to plan for your retirement. You may win big, but the odds are you won't.
Hmm. Should we be optimistic about Alzheimer's in the next decade or two?
I think we should. Out of this awful pandemic, I do take some hope that we've had a wake up call to the importance of care and caregiving. I'm optimistic that perhaps as a country, we now see the vital role of the social services and supports and care that humans give other humans and that humans need. So I'm optimistic that we may have a renaissance in views about the importance of care and caregiving. And secondly, I do think that if, as hyper partisan as things are in this country, particularly in DC, I think that both sides of the aisle come together and recognize that disabling cognitive impairments are nonpartisan, very common, and affect everyone. And we need some collective action as a society. So I'm optimistic over the next 5 to 10 years. And as I said, I do think there probably will be some therapies that have some effect on the course of the disease as well.
If you were going to issue a call to action on prevention, treatment, or cure, what should we do?
Well, we should continue to do what we are doing. The nation has a national Alzheimer's plan. It was signed into law by President Obama in 2011. Since then, now it's reviewed every year by National Institute of Aging and other stakeholders. In addition, Congress allows the NIA to ask for just how much money it needs every year to do the research it needs to do in what's called a bypass budget. Those legislations, those authorizations need to continue. That's one thing. The second thing that I think that needs to happen is we need to take on a serious conversation in this country about developing a long-term care social insurance program. We're one of the few developed nations that has no long-term care services and supports program. Now you could say, well, maybe they're all wrong and we're right. I beg to disagree. I think that a risk that is so vast and large as the risk of developing dementia needs a social insurance program to help people live with and address it. It's simply folly to think that you can save your money up for this or purchase on the market policies and such that I think, frankly, just don't simply address the problem either.
Yeah. Well, thank you. And thank you for a really great book. The Problem of Alzheimer's by Dr. Jason Karlawish is available in hardcover and ebook from your
And
favorite
audiobook.
bookseller and audiobook from your favorite booksellers. Thank you.
Thank you, David.
I'm going to